Welcome to the next session of Distributed File System Implementation. In the first session, we already discussed about file usage and system structure. And in this session, we will be discussing about caching and cache consistency. Now, in a client-server system, each with main memory and disk, there are basically 4 potential places to store files or parts of files. That is the server's disk, the server's main memory, the client disk if at all it is available, or the client's main memory. The most straightforward place to store all the files is on the server's disk. There is generally plenty of space there, and the files are then accessible to all the clients. Furthermore, with only one copy of each file, so no consistency problem arises in this case. Now the problem with using server's disk is performance. Before a client can read a file, the file must be transferred from the server's disk to the server's main memory. And then again over the network to the client's main memory. So both this transfer obviously is going to take time. So how do we achieve a performance gain? So considerable performance gain can be achieved by caching the most recently files in the server's main memory. So a client reading a file that happens to be in the server's cache eliminates the disk transfer. Although the network transfer still has to be done, since main memory is invariably smaller than the disk. So an algorithm is required to determine which files or part of the files should be kept in the cache. Now we'll see what are the requirements of the algorithm. Now whatever algorithm we design, there are two problems to be resolved. The first one, what is the unit that the cache will manage? It can be either a whole file or a disk block. If entire files are cached, they can be stored continuously on the disk, thereby allowing high-speed transfers between memory and disk, and which obviously gives a good performance. A disk block caching, however, uses cache and disk space more efficiently. Now the second problem is the algorithm must also decide what to do when the cache fills up and something must be evicted. So in such a case, any of the standard caching algorithm can be used here. But because cache references are so infrequent compared to memory references, an exact implementation of LRU using linked list is generally feasible in this case. So when something has to be evicted, the old one is chosen. So always evict the old one. If an update copy exists on the disk, the cache copy is just discarded. Otherwise, the disk is first updated. Now having a cache in the server's main memory is easy to do and totally transparent to the clients. Since the server can keep its memory and disk copies synchronized from the client point of view. There is only one copy of each file. so no consistency problem will ever arise. Although server caching eliminates a disk transfer on each access, it still has the network issues. The only way to get rid of the network access is to do caching on the client side, which is where all the problems comes in. Now the trade-off between using the client's main memory or its disk is one of space versus performance. The disk holds more but is obviously slower. When faced with a choice between having a cache in the server's main memory versus the client disk, the former is usually somewhat faster and it is always much simpler. Of course, in large amounts of data are being used, a client cache may be better. Now, in any event, most systems that do client caching do it on the client's main memory. So we will concentrate on that. If the designer decides to put the cache in the client's main memory, there are basically three options where we can place the cache. The simplest one is to cache files directly inside the user process. So the cache is inside user process own address space, as you can see in this figure. The next two methods are, the cache is managed by the system called library. As files are opened, closed, read and written, the library simply keeps the most heavily used ones around, so that when a file is reused, it may already be available. Now when the process exits, all modified files are written back to the server. Although the scheme has an extremely low overhead, it is effective only if individual process opens and closes file repeatedly. A database manager process might fit this description, but in the usual program development environment, most processes read each file only once. So caching within the library wins nothing. The second place to put the cache is the kernel, as we can see in this particular figure. The disadvantage here is that a kernel call is needed in all cases, even on a cache hit. But the fact that the cache survives the process more than compensates. For example, suppose that a 2-pass compiler runs as two processes. Pass 1 writes an intermediate file read by pass 2. After the pass 1 process terminates, the intermediate file will probably be in the cache. So no server calls will have to be made when the pass 2 process reads it in. And the third place for the cache is in a separate user level cache manager. You can see in this figure. Now the advantage of a user level cache manager is that it keeps the microkernel free of files system code. It is easier also to program because it is completely isolated and is much more flexible. Now we will discuss on cache consistency. So basically there are 4 different methods where we can handle cache consistency. The first one being write through, followed by delayed write, write unclosed and centralized control. We'll discuss the write through algorithm first. Now when a cache entry, which may be a file or a block, is modified, the new value is kept in the cache but is also sent immediately to the server. So as a consequence, when another process reads the same file, it gets the recent value that was being updated. Now suppose in this case we have the server and we have different client machines. We have the server's main memory, server cache, the server's disk. Same with respect to different machines, client main memory and the client cache. Now suppose that a client process on machine A reads file F1 from the server. Now this particular client terminates, but the machine keeps the file F1 in its cache. Later, a client on machine B reads the same file from the server. Now this particular process also modifies the file and writes it back to the server. So now the server is having the latest updated file. Now later, or finally, a new client process is started on machine A now. So now this particular new process which has started on machine A wants to read the same file. So the first thing it does is it opens the cache and reads the same file F1 which is taken from the cache. So unfortunately this particular process gets an absolute value of F1. So how do we solve this particular problem? A possible way out is to require the cache manager to check with the server before providing any client with a file from the cache. This check could be done by comparing the time of the last modification of the cached version with the server's version. If they are the same, that means the cache is already updated. If not, then another read has to be performed from the server. So another trouble with this write-through algorithm is that although it helps on reads, the network traffic for writes is the same as if there were no caching at all. Now many system designers find this unacceptable and they do something called as cheating. Now what is this cheating? So what they do is, instead of going to the server the very instant the write is done, the client makes a note that a file has been updated. So once every 30 seconds or so, all the file updates are gathered together and then sent to the server all at once. So what happens over here is a single bulk write is usually more efficient than many small ones. So this is about delayed write. And finally we have, now we'll discuss write and close. Now in this case, a file is written back to the server only after it has been closed, which is called as write on close. And finally we'll discuss about the centralized control. So we have the server over here with certain parameters which is maintaining about different files and which clients are using those particular files. So if you look at this particular table, it maintains information about the client ID, the file ID, certain operations that are being performed on those files, status of those files. So you can see file 1 is being used by client 1 and client 2, and the operation that it is performing is read operation. The status is unlocked and it is in the open mode. Whereas client 3 is using file F2, where the operation performed over here is write, and this particular status and the status on this particular file is locked. And we have another file F3 where the status of this particular file is shown as closed. So now what is all this? Now when a file is opened, the machine opening it sends a message to the file server to announce this particular fact. The file server keeps track of who has which file open and whether it is open for reading, writing or both. If a file is open for reading, then there is no problem with letting other processes open it for reading. Like we have file F1 opened by two clients only for reading purpose. But opening it for writing must be avoided. Similarly, if some process has a file open for writing, all other accesses must be prevented. When a file is closed, this event must be reported to the server so that the server can update its table telling which file, which client has which file open. So that finally the modified file can be shipped back to the server at that particular point.